right, we'll actually go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the second webinar in the series for the biodesign and public health. We have a great team of people today that we'd like to get to know a little bit better. But first, I am Dr. Candace Carpenter. I'm one of the Chief Executive Officers of the Boston Congress of Public Health and the Chief Strategy Officer as well. And I will be co-hosting along with my colleague that I'll pass it over to now, Miss Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Dunsford Hernandez. I am the Innovation Hub Coordinator for UCLA Biodesign, as well as the Ecosystem Development Director for Salud Con Tech, a Latinx-based healthcare tech organization in LA, and a clinical specialist for Veris Health, a digital health company. And also, I'll pass it off to Dr. Circe Gray-Lecomte for her intro as well as her co-host.
Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry. My video has stopped working, but it's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm co-CEO of BCPH with Dr. Carpenter, and I'm also CTO, and looking very much forward to learning more about this amazing new technology and how it can improve our health.
All right, so just a little bit more about the Biodesign and Public Health series, which I have back behind me. We wanted to make a series that was very different than what we've brought to the traditional BCPH, which is very intersectional public health topics as well as social justice topics. But we felt that there was an opportunity to be able to see what are some of the technologies that really are impacting like not only individual health, but public health as well. So that's why we wanted to bring you the Bioacoustics Labs in this webinar too. But this is number 2 of a series of 3 so far. And potentially we may increase the series depending on how many other people we can get into. So write to us and feel free to let us know how much you really enjoy this content. But I'll pass it on to Emily because she can tell you a little bit more about where BAL actually finds itself and some other things about biodesign at UCLA specifically.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. So we have a couple slides about UCLA Biodesign right here. UCLA Biodesign is a UCLA Health-based program that is helping develop medical technologies to benefit patient care. And actually, before I even scroll away from this, we're accepting applications to our accelerator until the end of the month. And I wanted to link at the bottom if you are interested for more information. We have a lot of fellows. We have 3 different tracks of fellows, as well as a medical student track that helps to train innovative medical technology discovery and development for even like people who are training to be doctors. So we're super excited about that. And we are also accepting applications for the UCLA Health Innovation Challenge, which is where anybody from the UCLA community, whether it's patients, providers, healthcare staff, and also support for families, you can submit ideas that would help benefit patient care. So we're excited to be able to fund that. And also that is through June 30th. So there are different tracks for the UCLA Health Innovation Challenge. You can read more about it online. And actually, this is a really good intro into why we're here today. So UCLA Health Biodesign also has a Techquity Accelerator, which Bioacoustics Lab is proudly a part of. We're super excited to be talking to them today. And I think, Brandon, if you want to do your own intro, you can definitely speak to that better than I can. But Bioacoustics Lab has been one of our amazing companies in this past cohort. So please take it away. I'm excited to hear.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Dr. Candace, and thank you, Dr. Circe. My name is Brandon Howard. I am the co-founder and CEO of Bioacoustics Lab, and it has been, quite an honor and an adventure being a part of the Techquity program. Their focus on delivering solutions to under-resourced neighborhoods is something that touches close to home for me. I grew up in South Carolina, and watching, that state and that region sort of get decimated over COVID-19 is one of the reasons I'm still involved in what we're doing. We'll definitely dig into how we're using sound and vibration as healing modalities and trying to bring that into the healthcare space and make that an accessible resource for those under-resourced neighborhoods. So lots to share there, and I'd love to get into it, but let me first introduce my team. We have 2 members. First, we'll go Dr. Julia, and then we'll go with Destiny.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Julia Paraderi. I am a neuroscientist by training, also a musician, multi-instrumentalist, and also quite well-versed in the meditation space and kind of natural ways to help the body heal itself. I work a lot with medical foods, with sound and vibration since meeting Brandon, and just really excited to give doctors some additional tools that are really effective and inexpensive and accessible as well. Yeah.
Thanks for that awesome intro from you both, Brandon and Julia. And I am part of this team because I also am about session for healing, and not just individual healing but collective healing, especially for communities that have experienced generations of trauma, and how that plays a big role in health equity and health outcomes. And specifically, I'm a music cognition researcher, so I look at peer-reviewed articles and other sorts of resources to help support the work that we do, to inform the design of our products or our research protocols and studies.
Awesome. So let me know if I should just go ahead and jump into the demo, or if there are more intros that you wanted to share.
Yeah, let's see the demo.
All right. Then I'll go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully we will all be able to see it. All right. So just gonna go ahead and jump in. As I said, as the co-founder of Bioacoustics Lab, Dr. Julia is my other co-founder, and Destiny is our head of research. And so my background is largely driven by my experience, and what brought me here was, rupturing 2 lower discs in my back and making my own sort of comeback using sound. I typically tell the story of how I went from dunking on Kevin Garnett as a high schooler to barely being able to crawl around my house as an adult. So, what could I do to fix that situation, and how can I, improve my situation and help others? And so working with Dr. Julia, essentially what we've gravitated to is, health equity by way of ancient medicine. What we found and what I tapped into was sort of a practice that had been used for thousands of years by monks in different cultures, and realizing that if we can find some scientific efficacy related to these modalities, then they might be able to have an impact. So again, ultimately we're gravitating towards treating chronic pain using sound and vibration as a healing modality, and how can we bring that into the healthcare space. And so this infographic is something that I've been developing for quite some time. It's kind of our foundation in terms of, here's our hypothesis. Can we use specific sounds and even more specific, in particular frequencies, like what hertz is going to have an impact on the human body? And in a sort of non-clinical way, we've had a lot of people use this system. And essentially what we're trying to build to is using emotions as symptoms. It's not something that's common, but I think that, what I found through my experience was that with having 2 ruptured discs in my back, when that frustrated me or bothered me or upset me, like my pain would get worse. And so if I could reduce that pain, or how could I go about reducing that pain, it seemed like taking a psychological approach and putting myself into a better mood worked often. And it showed that it eventually reduced inflammation and a lot of other ways of improving my health and well-being. And so, wanting to see if that was something I could scale, something that I could share. And so this particular pattern has led us to innovating towards, addressing specific chronic injuries, chronic pain, chronic situations. And as we try to bring this into the healthcare space, navigating the commercial and the healthcare side of things, we're realizing that kind of lends us to sort of 3 ways that we can bring this to market. So we've got the over-the-counter approach for chronic self-care. We have the health-enabled approach, which we want to deliver to doctors and therapists and the healthcare space overall. And we see that also building into sentiment AI, and where things can be automated, but we always want to keep it human first, human centric, and letting people have that ownership and control over what directions they go and how they improve their own health. And there's a lot more we can dig into there, but we wanted to share a little bit about the efficacy behind it. There is an app that the first app that we launched, our first product is called Euphoria, and it has been out on the market since 2017. Since then, we've had over 40,000 downloads. And for those who have used it or haven't used it, after listening to a session for at least 30 seconds, we recommend 10 minutes or less in order to feel the effects. However, people tend to feel the results faster than that. Sometimes people listen for 8 to 10 hours at a time. But ultimately, at the end of a session, you get to vote on if we helped you reach that target, state of mind and that end result of less pain or feeling more relaxed or whatever you sought after. And 80% of the time we get there. And so that has helped us connect with other companies, other platforms, other opportunities. And all that momentum is the reason why we don't quit. And it all boils down to essentially that ignoring stress leads to chronic pain. Julia can speak more to the science of how and why the stress is creating pain, creates the inflammation. And Julia, did you want to mention anything now, or do you want to save that for after?
Let's save it for after. Yeah, keep going.
All right. So with that as like the core framework, also looking at how chronic pain is impacting different demographics and sort of what that says about the way healthcare is currently structured for everybody, not just individual groups. But to break it down, insured people who have insurance, who have access to insurance, they do pay more out of pocket. They are spending a lot more on healthcare. However, our target is primarily the uninsured. This is the demographic that seems to be getting hit the hardest by some of these pandemics and epidemics. They're essentially in like healthcare deserts. And so that's why we need to bring resources to these demographics. The simple fact is those who are uninsured are 3 times less likely to seek medical treatment, but they also live almost 15% shorter lives than those who have insurance. And so I think ultimately our goal is to balance that out for everybody and to also bring solutions to the healthcare space that, offer more benefits than side effects. And so looking into, some of our competitors out there, like who's bringing, sound and vibration as a healing modality to the healthcare space, we haven't seen a lot of competitors for that specifically. There are other companies who are doing things for sound related to well-being. Some of them have pursued clinical research. I think the closest company that's trying to focus on mood and emotions and symptoms into the healthcare space is MoodMD. However, they're not using sound as sort of a path to make shifting your mood easier. So I think that we have an advantage there. And so, as rounding out a few of these things, another reason that we are sort of taking this approach into the healthcare space and seeking out grants from the government, UCLA and Tequity, they introduced us to NSF and the I-Corps program. That is opening up doors for us to move into SBIR finance or funding. The non-dilutive funding is more attractive, and I'm not really one for pitching to VCs all day, every day. So picking this path is, the reason I'm bringing it up is because the NIH held 2 conferences in December. One was Music is Medicine, and the other one was Art is Medicine. And so that gives us a lot of flexibility for thinking creatively on how to address these chronic conditions. So if we're doing these clinical studies and commercial studies to validate that these frequencies have the impacts that we believe them to have. Like, as I said, the commercial approach with Euphoria has proven that on some level, but the NIH and their Music as Medicine approach allowed us to sort of look back at all the ways that healing has been done in the past, from the ancient vibrating temples to how tribes and cultures have incorporated it into activities, to Pythagoras and his theorems and the solfeggio scale, to how monks and Gregorian monks and Tibetan monks have been singing, humming, and chanting these things over time. And even down to Royal Rife in the 1930s, how he used sound and light to sort of eradicate cancer cells. What we're doing is sort of the modern interpretation of these things. We have our own platforms with binaural beats that we're using through headphones. We're working with Sony to tap into this 360 audio and see if we can really target internal and external parts of the body with sound. And Data Feel is another company that we're working with, and that vibrating, that hockey puck that you see at the bottom does a lot of things. I'm under NDA on most of it, but I can tell you that it is a healing modality that does multimodality healing, and that's actually their image on the right. We're building towards being able to really isolate, specific ailments, specific parts of the body, and developing technology that can address them specifically. So that is what I wanted to share in this really quick rundown. There are plenty more slides in case I can use them to answer any questions, but I figured I'd let the conversation keep rolling, and I can dig into more if we want.
Excellent. That I think that was a great demo, and definitely targeted to our audience, right? A number of conversation things around health equity and public health as well. And I know that you guys introduced yourself, but we wanted to get a sense of your journey to the Bioacoustics Lab. And Brandon, I know we heard a little bit more from you, but if we wanted to go to Destiny and then Dr. Julia, about what brought you to BAL, what keeps you working with BAL?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very grateful. I've been working with Brandon for around 4 to 5 years now, and we met through the startup kind of environment. And I was an undergrad, really passionate about the intersections of music and health. So I did an honors thesis, and I was also working with Brandon on things related to like earworms. That's what my honors thesis was about. And I have a background in psychology, so that's why I was so interested in these earworms and how they can be thought of as intrusive experiences. But actually, I found out through research, some people tend to like them and they move their body to it and they enjoy it. And so the diverse experiences that people have, I wanted to bring that to the work that I was doing with Brandon, and seeing how we can really apply it in a direct way towards people's lives, in ways that benefit them, and like Brandon said, really help people feel like they have more agency over their health. And yeah, we've been working together for a few years, and now we are working on Bioacoustics Lab together. And with this role, I'm very grateful. I've met with a lot of really wonderful patients, doctors, other collaborators. We can always share more about that as well. But working with Brandon has been a blessing, and it has always been fun. So that's basically how I met, through the startup environment and through collaborating on similar passions.
So I met Brandon about a year and a half ago, and we were at the same event at Bioscience LA, which is a great bioscience hub in Los Angeles. And so we were just sitting next to each other. I have another company I'm working with on algae to help the body heal. And we just started chatting and we got interrupted by somebody. And so we ended up having to, very rudely interrupted, I might say. So we had to reschedule our chat, and we met up a few days later, separate, and we just found that we have a lot in common. Brandon had euphoria. I came in from the neuroscience background and drug development and clinical research. And when we started talking, I realized that there's so much healthcare oriented potential in his technology. And, Brandon's background isn't in healthcare necessarily, besides his own journey and his own case study with the technology. But when we started talking, it just flowed. We had a website a couple months later, and Bioacoustics Lab was really the combination of our expertise, and it still seems that way. We haven't had a hiccup yet. It's been smooth sailing, and I'm glad that we're figuring this out, because of course there's a huge barrier to entry. There is always the risk of the standard of care practitioners going, oh, this is woo-woo, or this doesn't work, or where's your data? And all we have to fall back on is ancient medicine. Really, this is already proven to work. Cultures have been using it for so long, and our goal now is to validate that in modern scientific terms with clinical research, and really position ourselves well where we can resonate and be accessible to the patients, as well as the practitioners who are involved with underserved communities, because this is again, technology does not come with side effects, right? And this is quite a unique way to at least scratch the surface on things broader than a physical symptom.
You're talking about the clinical research aspect of this it's a perfect segue into the next question. We want to ask about the science behind your patented sound frequency recommendation engine and like how does it personalize treatments for individuals?
Brandon, do you want to take that one? Brandon
I
is
will.
the developer of this technology, so I always, even though I'm the neuroscientist, he has much more insights on how this came about in the patent.
Sure. So I am trying to quickly scroll over to a slide that will explain this better than I can with words alone. Essentially, going from, we refer to that rainbow person that you saw, that's what I call the Da Vinci model. And, what we're also trying to do is bridge Eastern and Western medicine. I grew up in South Carolina, and, everything is woo-woo in South Carolina except the Bible. And so proving this on a very valid level is very important to me. And I also went to Brown University where everybody can is quick to be skeptical and judge things they haven't seen before either. So I really want to take a very scientific approach to this. I could not do this without Julia and Destiny. They bring a lot of that, experience and expertise to the conversation. So it gives me confidence that if I say something that's slightly off, they'll come in and fix it. So feel free to interrupt if you need to. However, so yeah, taking this Da Vinci model, and there are other details that we could add, but you can see that what we have in red are sort of like the negative emotions. And then what we have in the lighter color are the positive ones. And you can see that, categorically, there's 7 different categories. Each of them has a particular note. And looking into how, monks have been using this practice, what they've been doing is like balancing their energy or balancing their emotions. And the one thing that's not on this list are the chronic conditions that come about when you spend too much time in these negative states. And so what starts off as an earworm, it could be a negative, just like constantly negative thinking about a particular subject. You might start to feel aches and pains in a particular part of your body. And what we want to do is either help you psychologically, like have a healthier perspective related to this particular issue, or actually vibrate your mind and your body, like adding to brain elasticity, or just finding out what frequencies you can use to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So how that ties into the patent is once the data going in is somebody either using this diagram to point to where their pain is, or using a journal feature to describe how they're currently feeling, and then us highlighting what are those emotional keywords. And so regardless of what somebody says, we're going to organize that data according to our platform. We're going to score it, so that way there's a way to sort of track your well-being over time. And then the recommendation engine is where the patent, or the pending patent, I'll be clear about that. We're almost there with the patent, but ultimately it's tying, these conditions that people are experiencing, and then how do we shift it into the positive? So we have had success using that with binaural beats. We want to expand into, the art world and using color as well. We're hosting a workshop on Saturday at the Olympus Wellness Festival. It's happening in downtown LA, where we're teaching people how to hum into health. So knowing what tones to hum or notes to hum, given like the issue that you have. And then again, giving everybody that agency over how they like to heal. Destiny mentioned that, there's more to it than just sound and vibration, like dancing and movement. And even if you prefer to sit and meditate, but ultimately we want to provide a list of scenarios that people can use in order to identify like what works for them and how they want to experience their healing journey. And so all of that leads to the biofeedback. And after the intervention, whether it's a wearable measuring heart rate or heart rate variability, ultimately we wanted to get into the clinical studies to the point of being able to look at how hormones are changing in the body, like hormone levels, which seem to have an impact on our emotions. So if we can balance our emotions with sound and balance our hormones with sound, then I think that opens up a lot more windows in how we treat health for everything from infants to adults. So all that ties into the machine learning there at the bottom, and again that feeds up into the new data that's going into the algorithms. So That
And
was how
I do want to
yeah, go
add
ahead.
though one thing. So one of the things that has not really been widespread in terms of clinical research is how sound and vibration affects cells and cellular mechanisms, and how actually we can make physical changes with sound and vibration, with frequency. And you know, there's some studies on it, of course, and on even from effects on stem cells, effects on inflammation, effects on potentially the microbiome, of course, where things are dynamic and changing all the time. And potentially we can introduce these specific frequencies and vibrations to point things in the right direction and to shift the environment towards healing. And the brain, of course, is quite a powerful organ to do that. If you're familiar with the descending neural pathways, that you know is that internal opioid system that the brain has, and it's quite powerful in modulating the signals that the brain receives that are interpreted as painful, which of course has downstream effects and chronic disease, and further stress, and it's this cycle that we can interrupt with sound and frequency.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And just thinking, of my background and the number of times, in neurosurgery that we use high intensity focus ultrasound, right? So there are indications we're already using this to be able to deal with a number of different neurological diseases, or the fact that ultrasound is actually used in treating fibroids as well. So there is some clinical things that already exist. But Circe, you had a question.
Yes. So I was just wondering, and there's a question too in the Q&A. Just, I guess if you could talk a little bit about just the mechanism that's causing this biological change through sound. So do you have to wear headphones to achieve benefits? Is there an optimal range in terms of volume? And what exactly is being triggered to have this sort of change happen?
There's some things I can speak to. I would say that it's more about so sympathetic vibration, sympathetic resonance is an element that I paid a lot of attention to when designing this. Essentially, like you could look it up and say, like, if you put a bunch of clocks in the room, whichever one's giving off the most dominant vibration is going to get all the clocks in the room to tick at the same time. If you're looking at like old clocks, and so with that, being able to get into a specific mindset based off the frequencies you're listening to, it correlates to music, and how certain songs can invoke a mood, and how you can respond to that and almost be in that same mood as the person singing the song. So one element that I would say gave me confidence that this was happening and it's repeatable is the study of cymatics. If you're not familiar with cymatics, it's examining the patterns that get created in different elements based off of the sound vibrating underneath it. You'll see like people set up these big black boards, and they can put sand on them or salt, and then there will be a subwoofer underneath playing a certain frequency, and then a shape will happen, a shape will form. And a lot of these patterns you'll see are pretty evident in nature. And so there's more studies where they're using water, and they're shifting the shape of water using these frequencies. And with our bodies being made up of around 70% water, and there's water in our cells, there's potential that the water that we like, if we can make the water vibrate at a healthier frequency, then we can help that cell be healthier. And again, if you look at the cymatic studies, there's a doctor out of the UK. He has essentially been able to take the picture of what a cell looks, the sound a cell makes. And so if you could, visualize the sound that a cell makes, a healthy cell will look like a very geometric, symmetrical pattern, symmetrical shape. It's like a sphere, and it just looks solid. However, if you look at the sound of an unhealthy cell, you'll see how it's like internally it can be like shifted to the left or right, or it can be bent over, and it ultimately just looks like an unhealthy cell. So I feel that Julia can probably go into some better details than that. But when we're looking at the mechanisms, there does seem to be sort of natural response to specific vibrations depending on the matter that is being impacted by it. And we want to dig into that on a much deeper level.
Yeah, and I just to follow up, you know, Brandon is thinking from kind of the top-down approach, but there's also evidence from the bottom up, where, for example, mechanical vibration can alter the proliferation and viability of certain cells, and then also can slow down apoptosis or cell death. As well, it can stimulate gene and protein expression changes and you know, hormone secretion, cytokine secretion. So of course, those those underlie a lot of our function in the body. And our goal in the therapeutic clinical research goal as well is to determine which frequencies do what and then apply them in a prescriptive manner where we know exactly which combinations affect which conditions and might be most useful for specific indications, emotionally and physically.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm not a cell biologist, but I love everything like cellular and molecular. So I thought that was a great conversation, and especially sympathetic resonance. And then the other one, was it cymatics that you mentioned, Brandon?
Yes,
Fascinating.
CY. Yeah, if you want to look it up, I'll type the name of it into the chat.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to do some deep dives after this one because those are both new to me. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit. So Circe like had us probing a little bit deeper in terms of like the mechanisms of this technology, and so it sounds like you want to get into the clinical space. But what have you found so far? I guess through your workshops or through interviewing with people in terms of like being very specific. So chronic back pain, is there like a certain set of frequencies that works for that? Migraines, menstrual pain, like could you guys speak more to those things?
Sure. So over the years, I've had lots of people come up to me with their specific ailments, and I've made recommendations for them. You can look at the Da Vinci model if it's still up, and sort of get a taste for the novel diagnostic that we're working on, the concept of the pointing to the pain. So if you had back pain, depending on where is it your extreme lower back? Is it like your L4, L5? For me, it was my L4L5, which is why those are the numbers I jumped to. And it was creating like sciatic pain for me. And so, the way that we worked the way we created our first prototype is you want to first tap into the frequency associated with that area. So, if it's your, and we don't really, I designed this intentionally. Like I would talk about bridging Eastern and Western modalities. In the West, we refer to them as the endocrine system. So on the East, they call them chakras. And so either system makes it sort of, they parallel each other really well, especially when you look at the emotional overlay. And so somebody who comes to me with back pain or pelvic pain, like one, I get an idea for like what the area is, but then I also ask them sort of what emotions are they experiencing. And if sort of two things start to make sense, then I'll make the recommendation. And so we'll build a binaural beat. How we've done thus far is saying, all right, your carrier tone will be this frequency based off the area that's bothering you. And then what effect you want? Like, are you trying to reduce your pain? Are you trying to rejuvenate your cells? Are you trying to sort of like cure a pain or an ailment, or maybe even a chronic disease in some scenarios? And so I create these combinations. We share them with people, and then they get back to us and say like, yeah, that worked. I feel a lot better. And so we've dealt with everything from stomach issues to colds to flus to people trying to get over COVID symptoms, headaches, migraines. And so as you can imagine, like if my wife comes to me with a migraine headache, I'm going to recommend something related to the nervous system and the node A or the third eye chakra. And I'll also, like, the color green is associated with healing, and realizing that you can start to like puzzle piece the solution together. I'll admit, the first times I did it, I was like, I was hoping that it would work because it had been working for me. And so as I shared it with others, it started working for them. And so, yeah, we've never really had anybody come back and say it didn't work. And so that leads me to think that there is something a little bit more universal about the parallels between sound, light, color, biology, and the frequencies that we can use to jump from one to the next. Julia, Destiny, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I can share a little bit about the interviews we did during the TechWitty Accelerator and a little bit after. And we spoke with many people who had a major injury or a chronic condition. And we spoke with individuals, but also families. And we noticed the role of genes and environment in people's health outcomes and how they experience pain and treat their pain. For example, in certain families, there are hereditary or genetic conditions that tend to show up in the parents' children.
Oh, Destiny, I think it cut out. Let us know when
Experience
you're
this
back.
around my age. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
It cut
You
out
cut
after
out
the
for a
word
bit.
children.
He came back.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so the children around, their 20s would start questioning, why am I experiencing all these ailments? And then they would go back to their parents and realize the generational influences on their pain. And it could be the way that they learned how to regulate their emotions in childhood and how that plays a big role in stress, and then how they experience chronic pain. Or if you're experiencing chronic pain, how do you then reduce the stress associated with that? So in those interviews, that was a really compelling insight for us, is the role of genes and environment in people treating their stress and chronic pain. And then we also recognize that even after a serious injury has been, to the point where you can get back to daily activities, work, recreation, you can still have pains later on in life because of scar tissue or other ways that the body has not really fully healed, or, you're maybe stuck with something that has to be managed over time, for a long time. And so that's why the work that we're doing, we're very focused on chronic conditions, because they incur a lot of health expenses. It's a very confusing and complex process for them, because a lot of times they might be able to localize the pain, but in the cases, for example, with patients who have fibromyalgia, it's an all body pain. So how can we help patients localize their pain, but also recognize when it's very difficult for them to localize their pain, and still be able to help them with these frequencies and these vibrations? So that's what we've learned from speaking with patients and then speaking with specialists and providers. They seem very interested actually in the work that we're doing. It's more of the integration process that I think we're really working through. What would it look like to integrate these in a medical room or an ER room? What would it look like to bring frequency and vibration in ways to improve patient and health outcomes? So those are some of the things from our recent interviews.
Destiny, I'm really glad that you touched on the cycle of, like the generational aspect of this. I think that leads really well into our next question that we wanted to ask about how this platform breaks the cycle of chronic stress leading to pain and like subsequent health issues, particularly with like low income or low SES populations. Could you speak to that, like that public health aspect of it?
Yeah, I'll start that response. So when we got into TechWitty, before we got into TechWitty, when we first designed this back in 2017, the target audiences were nurses and military veterans. They were two of the groups that seemed to be experiencing the most stress. So those are our targets for stress-related reasons. And getting involved with TechWitty sort of expanded our scope to, the underserved communities. Underserved before TechWitty was kind of like everybody who was like struggling with the opioid crisis. But then, looking at communities that, were underserved, or even seeing the statistics on these populations, we realized that we needed to make, our product, our product has always been accessible. It's a free download on iOS. Not charging for it has been important, even though it's been a bit of a factor in its evolution. And so keeping it free has made it available, and it's inspired us to make sure that we always have sort of a premium approach to things. And so making it accessible was one. Keeping it simple is the next part. I know that the way that it's currently designed, some people might have that issue with like having too many options or too many choices. And so we want to innovate in ways that allows us to simplify how people identify, what frequencies they need or what will be best for them. So the idea of the Da Vinci model of like, point to the pain, we hope, we want to test that, but we hope it's a simple approach for people identifying, what might be bothering them. And then, making the technology, again, simple and accessible, whether it's a mobile app, whether it's a web app, even if it's our website and it's more instructional and educational. We want to make sure that everybody has as many questions as they need answered. There's a lot more content that we could put out on the science and sort of the back end of things, but we're also, focusing on making sure people have the kind of experience that allows them to move more seamlessly through whatever trauma or struggle that they have. And it's been a lot of feedback from existing customers who share that they wish that they could hear multiple binaural beats at the same time, or that if they could have devices that vibrate and create a binaural field around them. And then being able to track how your mood has changed and how you respond to these kinds of interventions, and what we can use to streamline that recovery approach and really just be supportive on that individual journey. We recognize that everybody's got a unique perspective and is going through, everybody, lots of people could have the same chronic condition. However, an approach to it might be different for each individual. So we want to be thinking about, what each person needs and how we can deliver to each person as we design what we're creating.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really fascinating where you're talking about like just having the binaural fields around you. So I wanted to ask two questions. One was slightly more controversial, and one was kind of a different question. So the first one is, it sounds like you guys aren't necessarily competing with Western medicine, but hoping to be complementary. But have you found any resistance where healthcare systems might actually see you as a competitor trying to undermine them? So that's the first question I'll go with.
Yeah, that's a fun one. So if you look at Bayer has, their pharmaceutical side. They've also been promoting the use of binaural beats, just not in the United States. So they've had billboards and advertisements in Germany and a few other countries in Europe, talking about how binaural beats and sound and vibration are complementary aspects. I think that going through this has been a mindful journey for me as well. And growing up playing basketball and almost thinking that like some of these chronic injuries I have is a result of playing sports and being competitive and living with that stress of a challenge, and finding it just to be a more pleasant path of trying to be complementary and more of a partner and more of an ally to all companies. Even within the healthcare space, we do realize that we are kind of like flirting with like preventative health. And instead of us seeing that as competition, we also see a lot of healthcare companies that are struggling, that are dealing with like I think it's recidivism. I think you guys know the word better than me, but there's so many patients that are going into the ER because of stress-related chronic pain, and then when they get sent home, they don't really have an actual solution, and they wind up going back to the hospitals and the doctors, and things eventually like escalate to really expensive scenarios. And we've seen in the insurance companies that they're also trying to minimize a number of these sort of expensive scenarios that come down the line. And so our perspective is, I think that if preventative medicine was more available, humans would just find more aggressive ways to push themselves to the limit. So I really don't see like anything that's currently happening in healthcare changing beyond like the need for there to be like acute scenarios that people need to address, as well as like preventative scenarios. So again, we think that for surgeons, for doctors who need to work on these types of like acute scenarios or extreme scenarios, we want to develop solutions for them as well. Sound and vibration doesn't have to stop at headphones and speakers. You, like you said, you're using other devices already that are more of the ultrasound range. We're focusing more on like the lower end of the frequency spectrum. And if there are ways that we can create, devices that doctors and hospitals can use in these, for all situations, that's really what we want to do is like, can we provide something that, isn't, I've had to get MRIs and like now I'm like afraid to get MRIs. Like I don't want to get stressed out in those machines that I'm kind of too big for. But for all the different scenarios, I mean, there's parts of the body like we could be healing people through their ears, through their feet, using like sound waves. And so if we can introduce something that makes everybody's life easier, then that's where we want to be. If we haven't run into, I mean, we've run into plenty of red tape in terms of, I deliver the app to nurses and they say, oh, we can't use this on patients. It's not FDA approved. We can't use this in the hospital. So we are taking that journey through the FDA to get that approval. And we want to interview the doctors and hospital staff and decision makers along the way. That's what we're doing with the customer discovery process. And our position is to adapt to how we can be most helpful, as opposed to like structuring ourselves to how can we be most competitive.
And I think we have to, as we go through this journey, we have to look at previous pioneers in the space. So you may have heard of therapeutics, who recently declared bankruptcy, and there's many reasons why that happened. But one of the reasons was the fact that they couldn't get insurance reimbursement for their technology, or that doctors weren't adopting it, or patients weren't adopting it, or weren't using the prescriptions. So there's definitely a lot of barriers to entry here, but that's why we're really leaning into the customer discovery before we spend a lot of money on development and clinical research, to make sure that we can find the ways into the healthcare system and be complementary, as you said, to the tools that are already there.
Absolutely. And Destiny, I think you had your hand up as well.
Yes, I'd just like to add that we also spoke with nurses and surgical techs in these medical settings, not only as people who can help the doctors provide these healing experiences, but also as patients themselves. We learned a lot of times that nurses, surgical techs, other people in the medical field, they're very human too, and they have their own pain and their own stress. So how can we help them navigate that as they help others and serve the community? So we've definitely seen that need as well, not only for the patients, but even the providers themselves being patients.
Yeah, I love that. And in fact, I'm always talking to Dr. Cersei about occupational health and how there's not a lot of research or work done in that, except for certain types of industries. And I think for the medical workforce, that is absolutely a prime area for additional innovations, right, for therapeutics. So my next question is, where does, Bioacoustics Lab see itself like in that landscape of digital therapeutics, but then also within global public health, because we can easily see how it might work within the US context. But what are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of like the all other digital therapeutics that are out there, and then also impacting the world?
Sure. So in the world of digital therapeutics, as Dr. Julia mentioned, there have been some early entrants that are finding some challenges and some struggles to stay afloat. How we compare to them is they're not using sound. And I think like that offers us like a really useful tool that is cost effective and accessible. And I think that's one of the primary differentiators. I think I had a slide on some of the comps. I think we already passed it, but yeah. So as far as other digital therapeutics, we're a differentiator using sound. And what can you remind me? What was the second half of your question?
Absolutely. So, we've touched upon certain topics within, say, domestic public health, but like on a global public health scale, what are you guys looking at?
Right. Interestingly enough, Asia is further along in being open to sound as a healing modality. Like, this taps into a form of Ayurvedic medicine called Nada Yoga, and that is still managed to proliferate on some level in Japan, China, India. And one of the members on our team has done some medical device sales in Asia. And so we want to leverage his expertise and experience and network to expand to those demographics first. I think that if we can tap into the Asian markets, that might actually create more influence for the Western markets. I think we also need to look at like south of the equator. We might have we do have users or customers in Australia, in Thailand, not so much in South America. So there are regions that we do need to explore a bit more and understand how we can have an impact. But being a mobile device, we've been able to reach people around the world already. And so we see that as an opportunity for us to just, expand our offering and entice more people to sort of gravitate towards resources that they've been familiar with, just in sort of a more modern way.
And one thing I'll add to that is one, we don't have a cold storage issue, right? It's a digital device. We can just pass it on to whoever needs it, and all they need on their end is just a device of some sort and some headphones, right? And then the other part is we're intentionally going after multiple levels of technological development. So one, as Brendan mentioned, was the over-the-counter kind of direct to patient, as well as the therapeutic level and the diagnostic level. So within that framework, we hope that we can reach as many people as possible. So some people prefer to hear this information from a doctor and have an actual prescription, where some people are more into self-care and being more discreet about their issues, and in which case we have that accessible option for them to just download the app and navigate it themselves.
Thank you for that. Honestly, we covered so much. I kind of want to wrap up this question portion by asking everyone from the BA lab to give like one short advice, like if you would give to like budding entrepreneurs or something that you live by with regards to this like innovative process. What advice would you give?
I'll volunteer to go first. The one thing that I'll say, I kind of have two, but the one thing I'll say is I found it most beneficial to lead from the heart. I think that there's a lot of tough decisions that you have to make. And I think that if we can listen to the advice our heart gives us, it'll impact us, it'll impact our health, and it'll impact, our choices and our experiences. So I offer that. But as an entrepreneur, I would tell everyone to find monetization as early as possible.
I would say it's so important, so important to do customer discovery. And by that I mean just talk to people. It doesn't have to be very structured. Just get out of the building. A lot of, especially technical founders, tend to create a vacuum around themselves, and they have this great idea and they'll develop it, and they'll spend so much of their time and money and even investors' money to develop it, and thinking that if it's good enough, then you can get it out to the market and to the people who are going to use it. And in fact, it works quite the opposite. You want to know what the unmet needs are, what your customers are thinking about, and then tailor your development to kind of generally fit in that. Obviously, you're a disruptor, you have innovative ideas that maybe aren't present yet, but there's still ways to look at the nuances of your customer needs and see how you can adapt to what's already out there.
Yeah, one quote that I heard last year was, if you want to go fast, you can go by yourself, but if you want to go far, you go with others. And that was very life-changing to me, because I see that in all the ways that, for example, with like Julia was saying, stakeholders, you want to get to talk to as many people as possible to understand the diversity of experiences and their unique needs and how you can address them, as opposed to making assumptions, creating something, and then it turns out it might not actually address their specific needs because you didn't meet with them originally. So I see that applying in how we interview stakeholders, but also secondly, how we interact with collaborators. Brandon and Julia have been doing amazing work connecting with so many different professionals and different disciplines that want to be a part of this work, whether it be through providing a device or by sharing word of mouth or helping us with interviews. People want to help. So just, put yourself out there and trust yourself, and people will come, people will join your mission.
Amazing advice. Thank you. And Dr. Carpenter mentioned doing the Q&A after this session. So if it's okay with the team, the BA Lab team, can we go over a couple more minutes? Just get a couple more questions. Ah, amazing. Thank you. Dr. Carpenter, how do we unmute, or how should we best go about this?
So there is somebody who did have their hand up. We were going to make it so that they could speak. So Blessing, we're going to go ahead and give you the floor if you would like to ask your question live. So Blessing, you can ask a question if you'd like to just go ahead and unmute.
I
may
clicked it so that she can
yes.
ask, to click to go to unmute.
It's possible that maybe she's stepped away. So we'll go to the next one. We can always circle back to Blessing. So one of the questions that we had for the BAL team, what is your view of those numerous YouTube videos that use specific frequencies to treat illness and disease?
Sure.
Well,
So
first of all, they can't. This is a regulatory barrier, right? Like they're not allowed to make therapeutic claims, period. So which is they probably don't have a lot of clinical research behind them, and you just be wary of what you're reading and what they're promising. And just keep in mind that the right tools are available they're validated, and a lot of these things are just kind of somebody's theoretical understanding of what happens, and so we're striving to make that more serious and higher level. Yeah.
I'll add that when I first started looking into binaural beats for myself, and I was on YouTube, I would listen to something for a while, and I didn't necessarily know. I didn't have the confidence that it was the right frequency. I wasn't exactly sure what I was listening to. And so when I designed our first prototype, I wanted it to be incredibly transparent, almost too transparent, in terms of letting people know like what the frequencies are, what emotions are affiliated with them, and then getting the feedback to find out if people actually experience what they were going towards. So I wasn't going to use like YouTube likes and dislikes to validate whether or not something was like scientifically effective. And even doing so and getting the efficacy that we have, Julia and Destiny both know that I want to see this on a on the microscopic level. I want to, have the confidence that this is doing exactly what we say it's doing, and that way we can repeat it, and that others can have the same experience. So, transparency, I think, is a major differentiating factor between our approach and what we can see on YouTube.
I'm glad we got that question answered too, because I hadn't previously seen any of those YouTube videos. So now if I do, thank you for that briefing. I think another question that we had was from Stephanie Anderson with regard to how is this method of healing adapted for people who have low or no hearing and people with sound sensitivities?
Sure. Oh, want to go ahead?
I could just speak to that a little bit because of my past research with misophonia. And that is a sound sensitivity condition that ranges from subclinical to clinical. So misophonia is the hatred of specific sounds. So some really common ones are chewing, tapping, even breathing for some people. And at times they can be incredibly specific. And so with this condition, there are specific sounds that are very triggering for individuals that cause not only a mental, but really physiological negative response. So I'm really glad someone brought that up. We haven't really run into any yet that people have mentioned that they have a sound sensitivity, but that is something we're being mindful of. For example, conditions like misophonia, and then even another condition is congenital amusia, which is when people don't experience enjoyment of music. And I don't know if that specifically relates to sound as well, like frequencies, but that is another condition that we're aware of and are mindful of when we're putting together these sounds and vibrations.
And we're also working with multimodal technologies. So sound frequency is just one modality, but there's also vibration, there's also color frequencies, and those combinations may be more appropriate for some individuals than others.
And I will add that uh, some people who have been struggling with insomnia have used our prototype to try to get more sleep. And they've complained about sleeping with headphones. They've complained about the volume being too loud. And what we've been able to do is really learn through that process. Giving people, suggesting that they use just the phone, just a speaker out of their phone, or a speaker that they can connect their phone to. You can, keep the vibration happening like away from you. You can have it, playing softly, like, next to your bed or on your nightstand while you sleep. And it goes back to creating that vibrational field and that sympathetic resonance, where if you've got something pulsing out, something healthy for you, and then that ultimately like seems to, consume the space that you're in, your body will still resonate with it. It'll still find that vibration as subtle as it is. I think what we found so far is that the volume can accelerate the effects versus whether it has an effect or not. So ultimately, at the lowest volume, if you're pulsing out energy, you'll get the results that you want. It just might happen slower. So for people who are trying to stay asleep all night, having it quiet, having it next to the bed, and even the way it's designed to play behind other music, behind your podcast or whatever you like to listen to, you can still have the same effect. So it doesn't need to be the only thing happening or the only thing you hear. It doesn't have to be loud, and people are still reporting that they're getting the results that they want.
Wow, this has been an amazing conversation. I know, as always, I learned so much with these webinars, and definitely like, the number of things that you mentioned too, Destiny, like all of that's coming back to me, the musia and some of the other different conditions that I definitely have learned about, but haven't encountered as much, the sympathetic resonance and then the multimodalities that you were mentioning, Dr. Julia, as well. I wanted to thank the audience for being very patient. I know we got started a little bit later and then we were ending up late as well, but please note that this whole series will be on YouTube, and this particular one will be available immediately afterwards. But thank you so much, Brandon, Julia, Destiny, Emmy, Dr. Cersei, for a fabulous session. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It was an honor to be a part of your program. Really excited that we're getting to have these conversations with professionals like yourself and the professionals and students that have joined the call. I think that it's really awesome to see, like 7, 5, 10 years ago, like couldn't find more doctors talking about the potential of this. So to be working with Julia and Destiny and their backgrounds, it's really like I'm smiling big, but my heart is smiling bigger. So really grateful for everybody that's joined today. Thanks for listening to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure to be here. Happy to be involved in this amazing effort. So thank you for spreading the word.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Hope you all
Take
have
care,
a wonderful
everyone.
week. Thank you.
Be